In example 2, we're given the graph, and we want to write the equation. So we have to think, well, how do I graph something? I've been using DABC to graph. Could I look at the graph and figure out what each of these numbers would have been? For example, can you figure out where the center line is by looking at the graph? Sometimes, here's the most common mistake. Don't write this down. Somebody thinks this is the center line. I hope you can see now that I've drawn it that it's not right in the middle. Okay? How can you tell that it's not right in the middle? Well, if I measure from the center line to the maximum, that distance is 6. From the center line to the minimum, the distance is 4. Obviously, it's not in the middle. Probably wouldn't take you too long to figure out it needed to be there. Now if I check, what's the distance from my center line to a maximum? It's 5. Center line to my minimum, it's also 5. So not only did I figure out my center line has to be at 1, can you see that we also just figured out what our amplitude is? Our amplitude is the distance from the center line to a maximum. It's going to be 5. Now, your B value comes from your period. When we were graphing using DABC, we would use our B value to find our period. Now that we have a graph, we have to figure out from the graph what is our period. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One way is to start at 0. I'm going to put a green point. That's where it's at 0. It's at this point going down. When are we exactly at that point going down again? Right there. So can you see from my graph using those green points? There we go. Period is 2 pi over 3. Now, we had a formula. We had 2 formulas that we looked at. One formula was that our period is always 2 pi over our B value. There was also a rearrangement of this formula that your B value is 2 pi over your period. See if you can figure out the B value before the computer unfreezes. I wonder when it freezes, does my voice still come up over the video? Or does my voice freeze as well? You'll have to watch and find out. Never has a math video been so intriguing. Here we go. So most students say, oh, if I want to find my B value, I'll use this formula. B equals 2 pi over the period. So if I would do that, I would have 2 pi divided by 2 pi over 3. You have to use your fraction rules. How do you divide by a fraction? Dividing by a fraction is multiplying by the reciprocal. And if we're multiplying by the reciprocal, you may notice there was a 2 pi on the top and almost a 2 pi on the bottom. There it is. And we could simplify those, and we would get that our B value is 3. That worked out nice. But sometimes students go, hey, wait a minute, look at how my period was written. My period was written as 2 pi over 3, and I have a formula that my period is 2 pi over my B value. Some students can just steal it from there. Can you see how you could steal it from this form? That the B value would have to be 3. Okay. Now, It won't always work out that you can tell where this point is and this point is to easily figure out your period. Sometimes you have to use another technique. So another technique for figuring out the period, often students like to use, in this case, I probably look at my minimum to my minimum. That definitely is one period. If I want to figure out how far this is, I could count. And I could count that there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 boxes between the minimum to the minimum. I need to figure out then what one box is. Can you see that if 2 boxes are pi over 6, one box would be pi over 12? And then 8 of them would be 8 pi over 12s. And 8 pi over 12 also reduces to 2 pi over 3. So sometimes you can't tell just by going from 0 to a number what the period is. You might want to take a minimum to a minimum. And another technique that sometimes is useful is taking a minimum to a maximum. That would be 4 boxes, but a minimum to a maximum is never a full period. You'd always have to figure out that distance and double it to figure out your full period. So 3 different ways you can use a graph to find the period. One, if you can tell really easily from 0 to where it repeats itself, perfect. But sometimes the graph doesn't give you enough graph to do that. Second, you could look at minimum to minimum or maximum to maximum. Any point to where it repeats itself and count that distance and write down your period. Or you could take a minimum to a maximum, that would be half your period, and then you could double. So now we've got our D value, our A value, our B value. Final thing is we need a C value. The C value is your starting point. Since we're figuring out a sine graph, we have to ask ourselves, where does a sine graph start? I've been saying this over and over again. A sine graph starts in the middle, going up. So I'm going to take my yellow pen out here. I'm going to find my center line. I'm going to find the point right there where it's in the middle, going up. That is 1, 2, 3 squares to the right, 3 squares to the right. Each square was pi over 12. 3 squares to the right then would be pi over 4. And I can now write the equation. Y equals A value is 5. Sine. B value was 3. Shifted pi over 4, I'm going to write the word right here. That would mean minus pi over 4. We're so close. And then after the pi over 4, you would close that bracket? Yes? Can you imagine that? And then we'd write our D value, which is plus 1. And this would, oh, look at that. Probably why it was taking so long. I was like trying to calculate half a pi, and then the decimals go on forever, so pi over 4, and then plus 1. Okay. This is one possible answer. There are more than one right answer. I hope you can see that, for example, here is another place on the center line going up. So I could also write as an equation, y equals 5 would stay the same. Sine, the b value would still be 3. X, but now I have shifted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 pi over 12 to the right. This would also be a possible answer. And then you have, what if I chose this as a starting point and it's going down instead of going up? How does that affect the graph? The equation would be?
Minus 5
Yes.
times 3.
So a negative in front, but then this would still be 3. But now I've shifted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 pi over 12 to the right. That's another equation. So when it asks for an equation, you have multiple options. But the d, the a, and the b values will always stay the same. The a value is sometimes positive, sometimes negative, depending on what you choose. I hope you could also see here that if I wanted to, I could do a cos graph. The amplitude, period, and d value, center line, would be the same on a cos graph. But where does a cos? Where does a cos graph start? It's a good thing the mic can't pick up like swears inside your head, right? Because then this video would be full of bad words. But yes, the cos graph starts at the maximum. So everything would be the same. You would still have a 5. It would say cos. You'd still have a 3. But now you would count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to the right. So you'd have x minus 5 pi over 12. Let's see if we can write it. I thought before I was writing too fast, so I tried to write slower. Now I tried to write fast. I got like 4 letters in one number. So close. Questions you can write down are 4, 5, 6, and 7. Four, 5, 6, and 7. Beautiful. Stop our video. Maybe that's the problem.